I like living in a small town.
Most of the folks here in Bonneville are found folks. Of course, like any town, I guess we do have our share of some kooks. But pretty much, we all come from the same family tree, so everybody knows each other. At least it was like that until some of these foreigners started moving in. Geez, every time you look around, it looks like they're taking over half the town now. But for the most part, we all worship Jesus. Some of us even the Virgin Mary, mainly Mexicans. And boy, do we have some pious ladies living around here. But then, of course, some not so pious ones as well. Keeps things interesting, if you know what I mean. So when the first victim was discovered, it came as a real shock. The one-eyed detective discovered something near the body. Under his left hand laid a note. It said, "Die for..." Now what the heck was that supposed to mean? One lady saw it, but she was half mad with what she had seen. So she provided the detectives with a description. Two people she thought she saw. Two drifters. Here's one of them, smoking a cigarette, and here's his gal he came into town with. Turns out they were nowhere near the scene of the crime, even though the bad cop we have on board questioned him quite fiercely. So the two detectives were left to be stymied. They brought in Mr. Fay for questioning, mainly because nobody liked him. Then they even brought in Mr. Shades, who they liked even less, but they couldn't hold him on nothing. The townsfolk were just talking and talking and talking about this murder. They couldn't get enough of it. Everybody had an opinion on who done it. It was all a bunch of talk to me. Even at the fancy cocktail parties, it was acceptable conversation to speculate. But the smarter people, like Mrs. Bryant, the third grade teacher, kept her mouth shut and her ears open. A flock of birds alerted them to the second victim. They brought their canine unit in to start sniffing around the woods. The Beast, the police department's favorite canine, was sniffing in the forest some roots, and he came up with the second body. It had been flayed alive. The pathologist told us that later. The detectives were brought in once more, the one-eyed detective. What did he find? A note that said, "Die for art," near the body again. So he brought in Mr. Emo, who no one liked to question. The girls were getting terrified in town. Mrs. Grant tried to pacify him, quiet him down, tell him not to worry, but she too was getting a bit nervous at this point. In the middle school, Mr. Bryant had his own issues to deal with. Susie, always the troublemaker, started skipping school. So he called her mother in and told her to calm down and stop spreading so many rumors and cutting classes. You could see the strain on the older adults as well, though. It was really getting to them. You could see it in their eyes. They were simply terrified. They began not even coming out of their houses. You see, terror spreads like wildfire, and this terror was spreading like fire out of control. People were absolutely petrified. The one-eyed detective had a strange thing happen. Mrs. Kook, well, we all call her Mrs. Kook, came into the police station and said she saw a vision of blood, and an old Negro, not an old, middle-aged Negro man whose head was on a pole. Yet, despite all this, the sun still rose and the sun still set in Bonneville. Yet people became increasingly paranoid and began doing things indoors that they would never be doing outside. Then it happened. The head impaled on the post, exactly as the Kook had predicted. Blood all over the place. The two detectives were brought in. They had heard a woman scream for help. When they found the note, as usual, "Die for art." The psychologist was brought in again to perhaps come up with some suspects. So they brought the usual crew in, the devil, who nicknamed the devil, Mr. Shades, a.k.a. Mr. Shades, and Mr. Fay. That's actually his name, Mr. Fay. This guy was, seemed potentially dangerous, but he got his lawyer and he buttoned up real fast. Mr. Bryant, who, I don't know if you noticed, but he married the third grade teacher while all this was going on, tried to be a voice of reason. The bad cop shouted him down. They wanted to get some people locked up fast. Mrs. Bryant now was the voice of reason. She said, let's not jump to any hasty conclusions. But pretty soon someone was about to jump and hit the doorway. And that person was the real killer himself, who at the last moment had repented, found Jesus, said asked for forgiveness, and was forgiven.